going to talk about reloading. Specifically, I'm going to talk about it from a hand loading standpoint, not just reloading some cartridges. I'm an extensively experienced hand loader, and I have a tremendous amount of people that correspond with me that are just simply reloaders, as well as some experienced hand loaders. A hand loader, by definition, is an experienced reloader. He doesn't really need to go particularly anywhere for help. He understands, like I do, because I have reloaded over my lifetime over 250 different rifle and pistol cartridges. The average person is maybe only reloaded for 3, 4, 5 different cartridges, if even that. So my purpose here is to try to explain some things. I see that people are going to the reload manual. They might only have one, they might have several. I've got quite a number collected over a lifetime, plus a tremendous amount of data that I have produced, that a lot of it's recorded. The data has been recorded that actually worked well. There's things that never worked well. And you can pick up a reloading manual from all of the manufacturers, all the producers of these reloading manuals. And everybody, regardless of what cartridge it is, there are anywhere from several, there may be several dozen powders listed that can be loaded in various cartridges. And yes, the various powders can be loaded in that cartridge. But when you look at the loading manual, look at the velocities, look at the powder charges. You can pick any cartridge you want to talk about. This applies to every cartridge. There are powders that are ideal and well suited for the cartridge, and there are powders that can be used, but they're not ideal and well suited for the cartridge. Even though that you can use it, yeah, you can fire it, it'll go bang. That's not what we're looking for. Everybody that's reloading is looking for better performance out of their rifle, out of their handgun, whatever it may happen to be. And one of the reasons I'm detailing this is because I see that the average person does not understand that the denser loaded cartridge, in other words, the larger volume of powder used in the cartridge, those powders are slower powders. They give you higher velocities. There's no sense in shooting a 300 Winchester Magnum if you're going to load it down to a 308 Winchester. There's a lot of difference in those cartridges. This is why we have a lot of different cartridges for a lot of different choices, a lot of different purposes. You know, some part of the country, the 308 Winchester might be just all you need to hunt with. But in other parts of the country, you're far better off with a 300 Winchester. Well, we're sure as the world not going to be, taking advantage of the 300 Winchester if we're going to pick the powder that's got the cartridge loaded down about 250 or 300 feet a second. And you can go right up the column, go right down to the bottom of the listed load for a particular bullet weight. Those are the slowest powders, and as you come up, the powder gets faster in burning rate. And when it gets faster in burning rate, the pressure peaks out quicker, and so that limits the potential velocity that you are able to load that cartridge to. So I'm just going to talk about a number of cartridges. The 300 Winchester, I have found over many years that IMR 7828, Hyson's H1000, and Hodgson's 4831. There are other powders, but those are my go-to powders for that particular cartridge. And this applies to every cartridge that there is. There are certain primers that work better than other primers. And just because the cartridge says Magnum on it, that doesn't mean that you have to use the Magnum primer. Nope. We were loading cartridges long before with primers, before we had a little hotter primer called the Magnum primer, and it worked just fine. For instance, I loaded 300 Weatherby cartridges for years and years, and still do, with CCI 200 primers. That's not a Magnum primer. CCI over the years developed a Magnum primer and so forth. Winchester has several choices of primers. They've got their WLR, Winchester Large Rifle Primer, and their WLRM, their Magnum primer, and that Magnum primer is actually the hottest primer, the most powerful primer built for our modern rifle cartridges. Really works well in cartridges, with powder charges up there over 85 grains. Well, if it works well and was developed for that, why do you want to use it in a 308 or a 30-06? It's just simply not necessary. It's way too hot of a primer. These are the aspects that you need to understand. People got the silly notion that all primers are the same. Every primer from every manufacturer is different, just as you and I are different, just as everybody is different. The primers are also different. Every rifle is different, and so forth, in what it's capable of. And the listed loads in the loading manual is a guideline. It's a go-by. And you can start there, and you can develop your loads for each cartridge, beyond that. And one of the other very popular cartridges is the 270 Weatherby. The powders that I find are the very best in that cartridge are IMR 7828. And no, don't ask me about 7828 Super Shortcut because I didn't mention it. I said 7828. Nothing else. You see, it means exactly what I said, 7828. Reloader 25 and Reloader 26 are the very, very best powders for the 270 Weatherby Magnum. And this applies, as I said repeatedly before, to every cartridge. There's just powders that work better. I can load 4064. I can load 4895 in a 270 Winchester. It's a very poor choice for powder. The 270 Winchester runs its best on Hodgson's 4831, Reloader 22, and Reloader 26. I can mention cartridge after cartridge. The 25-06. That's also another situation. The very, very best powders for that cartridge have been Hodgson's 4831, IMR 7828, and there are other powders that may come close to matching some of these things, you see. But what I'm trying to do is answer so that you don't have to ask me. And that is, select the slow powders and work from there. And I always try at least 2 or 3 or maybe 4 primers in everything that I'm working up a load for. When it comes to rifle cartridges, one of my go-to primers, almost invariably, is the Winchester Large Rifle Primer. One of my go-to primers is also the Federal 215, Remington 9.5, Remington 9.5 Magnum, perhaps the large rifle CCI Magnum primer, you see, and the only way that you're going to improve upon these things and become a hand loader instead of reloader is start trying all these things. If you're not quite satisfied with the accuracy that you're getting with a particular powder and powder charge and primer and case, switch the primer. Sometimes it shrinks the groups by half or third just by switching a primer. You know that the balance is better. And you always need to chronograph everything that you're doing. Because if you're not, you're loading in the dark, you're loading blind. You're just simply not following what needs to be followed to give yourself the best performance. If you've invested in reloading equipment, invest in that chronograph and invest in a 1-inch 10th micrometer so you can read pressure. And I've detailed how to use that micrometer to read pressure. So use that micrometer in conjunction with your chronograph with all the loads that you are working with and trying to develop. It gives you a better understanding of what's happening internally and externally. What's happening with the performance that you see externally, for instance, on your chronograph and with your micrometer, that is a measurement of the internal aspects of the combustion of that powder with that bullet, with that primer in that cartridge. You see, this is where the difference is. Internal ballistics and external ballistics. This is what we're talking about here. And these things all work together and hand in hand to your advantage or to your disadvantage. But you have to use these things to be able to determine and measure all these aspects to develop a load. Another thing that I'm asked repeatedly, and I would have thought by now, especially after my details on bullets and proper bullets for hunting and one thing another, we have a tremendous selection of bullets, just absolutely unbelievable. Some wonderful bullets and some bullets that just don't seem to perform either in the accuracy department and or in the game department, or maybe weren't ever designed to shoot game. And, you know, deer-sized game, that's one thing when it comes to bullets. But we still need a bullet, irregardless of what we're hunting, that is tough enough to get the job done without the bullet just disintegrating and blowing up. Because this is not a good situation at all. You're going to lose the game. And we have, as I said, such a tremendous selection of bullets. People are being terribly misled because everything's been toted in such a strong way to this ballistics coefficient. Well, ballistics coefficient doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot till you get past 500 yards. It's just plain and simple. And it should be real obvious that you don't use round-nosed bullets to shoot at 500 yards. That should be pretty obvious. Because somebody's going to say, well, you know, this ballistics coefficient or that ballistics coefficient. Yeah, I look and see what the ballistics coefficient is, but that's not my deciding factor. I figure out what's going to work according to bullet construction. Some of the latest bullets that we've got here is this Federal bullet. It's the TLR Edge bullet, and they make several other bullets, but very, very similar. This has a reasonably high ballistics coefficient, and yeah, it might not be the highest, but the bullet is constructed better than virtually almost any bullet made by anybody, regardless of where they're made. They're excellent bullets. They kill game tremendously well. If you read much at all and have paid any attention, I believe it was published in the American Rifleman, went to Africa and shot game at distance. Went to Africa and shot game at distance. These bullets were recovered and pictured in the magazine article. Clear out there around 1,000 yards shooting game. Well, I don't promote shooting any type of game, regardless of what it is, under any set of circumstances at that type of a distance. But the bullet performed. But we're going to have somebody that remarks, well, it doesn't have quite the ballistic coefficient. Yeah, it didn't, or it doesn't. If you're just totally measuring everything by ballistic coefficient. But the bullet performed wonderful, and it killed the game, didn't it? That should be the end of the damn story. I'm not interested in listening to these silly comments about ballistics coefficient. I've killed game considerably past 500 yards a couple of dozen times, but most of my hunting, everything shot inside of 300 yards. Irregardless of the shape of that bullet, as any type of a Spitzer type of a bullet that is used, that's constructed properly, is going to do the job to kill the game at that distance, and the ballistic coefficient isn't going to scare that animal, frighten it right out of its tracks, and drop it any damn bit deader because the ballistic coefficient is 40 points higher than some other damn bullet. That's all nonsense. If you hit the game where it lives, with a bullet capable of doing the job, the ballistics coefficient is irrelevant. Yeah, it shoots flatter and one thing and another, but if you're going to take advantage to the ballistics coefficient to the point in yardage, you're already trying to attempt something at too far of a distance. So that should tell you that that this is quite immaterial and quite ridiculous. And I've got so much information on ballistics coefficients to do with bullets and one thing and another. Some of the stuff will just about drive you nuts. Long ago, I figured out what really worked on game, and it certainly isn't some of these thin-jacketed, high ballistics coefficient bullets that everybody seems to put on the market that, are nothing but thin-jacketed target bullets that people are using to hunt game with. So those are just some of the aspects. But my bottom line is to do with this loading. Use the slower powders. Use the slower powders. You're going to get the best performance out of your rifle. It may not be the very slowest. It might be the next slowest or the third slowest powder that works the best in your rifle. That's what it is. Learn to use your rifle. Learn to shoot your rifle. Practice with your rifle. And practice within your ability out to a range that you're honestly capable of taking game cleanly with one shot without any question. Not trying to tempt things that too far away, because this is not good. We've lost a tremendous amount of our wildlife from a lot of other aspects, and we don't need to add to it by using wrong combinations, wrong situations.